Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast, brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Well, I wanted to start off by showing you a satellite animation that goes from sunrise to sunset on Sunday. And it's a pretty amazing animation because it tells quite a story. We can really see the full evolution of the weather patterns that have affected our weather for the last week and what we're going to be expecting to see for the next 7 days. So let's get started. We've got basically a pretty broad trough sitting here off on the western side of the United States. You can even see the spin occurring right here just north of the Four Corners region. Out ahead of it, we have some strong moisture return out of the Gulf of Mexico colliding with this area right in through here where we have some surface convergence leading to the rising air and all of the showers and storms. Ahead of that, in the really warm air that's really occupied the eastern kind of half of the country, we had some pop-up showers and thunderstorms in through here, fed on that moisture but also on that heat. And then, of course, when you get all the way over to the East Coast and just off the East Coast, we have Category 1 strength Hurricane Maria. This is just a few days after, of course, it has done so much damage in Puerto Rico. So this is our setup. This is what we're dealing with this week. So let's kind of break it down and see where things are going. All right, first Maria. Maria is right now a strong Category 1 strength hurricane, and it's making its way due north. Now, what's interesting is that some of the forecast model tracks have Maria briefly brushing into the side, the coastline here of North Carolina near the Cape Hatteras region. And one of the big reasons for that is first of all, Hurricane Jose has just fizzled out to turn into nothing. And basically over the top of Maria, we have a rather large ridge. Because Jose is no longer there occupying much of anything, the ridge is going to basically allow for a mid-level steering wind to kind of push Maria a little bit to the west before turning back off to the east. And what's going to kick it off eventually to the east about 3 to 4 days from when I'm producing this video is that broad trough that you just saw that right now is sitting over the western United States. So at this point, it is looking as though Hurricane Maria is not going to be causing too much of a problem for the east coast and the northeast, as hopefully will be just turned away without too much fanfare at all. In fact, the National Hurricane Center late in the evening on Sunday went ahead and issued tropical storm warnings out for Cape Hatteras in this part of North Carolina, but you can see that the hurricane is really forecast to make that pretty hard turn to the right soon after brushing near the North Carolina coastline. And just for a little bit of background knowledge here, the Cape Hatteras region, this area is probably the most commonly hit region in the United States from hurricanes. So they're certainly prepared for this. And again, this will probably come in as a very weak Category 1 strength hurricane by the time it gets to that region. Okay, so that's what we're looking at in terms of Maria right now. Just want to bring up something that I mentioned in our last update. We know that the radar quit taking imagery very early in the morning on Wednesday, and one of the reasons why it stopped working in San Juan, Puerto Rico was because it was destroyed. Some pictures just surfaced on Sunday showing us the extent of the damage. Usually there's a large radome, that's a large kind of protective sphere that goes around the radar dish, which you can't even see the dish. The dish has been destroyed. The radome has been destroyed, and so this will be several weeks, if not months, before we actually have a functional radar out of San Juan again. And that's important because right now when we look at the tropical kind of heat content of the ocean, we can still see that right here in the Caribbean and into parts here by the Bahamas and really all around the Caribbean islands, we have quite a bit of heat that can still be used by any would-be tropical system that gets into those waters. And we are just past the peak in hurricane season, which means we still have quite a ways to go. Just a quick reminder though, once we get into October, most of our tropical cyclogenesis really happens in the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and then the far western Atlantic. So we're watching this region closely over the next month as the hurricane season tries to start slowing down. But remember, October is still a very active month. So even though nothing on the horizon outside of Maria for the next few days, we still need to keep an eye on this. Okay, let's transition back toward the Corn Belt in the central United States. I made this graph late in the night on Sunday showing you the number of hours above 90 degrees Fahrenheit for the last 7 days. My point is that we've had several locations, parts of Illinois, Missouri, parts of Kansas here, which are seeing some very unseasonably warm weather. In fact, this whole area, this is very warm for this time of year. Champaign-Urbana, right where Agrible headquarters is, our normal high temperature for this time of year is about 76 degrees. So we're talking in, sometimes we saw temperatures of the last end of last week in the mid-90s. We're 20 degrees above average. And why I point this out is this same area in the eastern Corn Belt where I'm kind of circling here probably didn't see many more hours than this through the entire month of July for temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So very, very unseasonably warm, kind of late summer, early fall weather. Now, we've been discussing what precipitation was going to look like for the last 7 days, and we've really seen the manifestation of that forecast really coming true here. Because of that deep trough and that broad area of surface convergence along this front that's been stretched north-south here, we've seen a lot of showers and thunderstorms. And some locations that I'm kind of circling in through here have seen better than 2 inches of rain over the last few days. So we're going to be paying close attention to this area over the coming days and how this possibly translates to the east as that trough begins to eject out of the mountains and moving across the Great Plains toward kind of toward the northeast. So what we're watching here is the flow about a mile above our heads on Monday. And you can see the moisture return right out of the Gulf of Mexico, even coming off of the hurricane and kind of converging right here along this line. And so that's going to be our focal point on Monday for the continuation of these showers and storms. So we kind of look at this in animation. This started late in the night on Sunday and kind of animates all the way through Wednesday into early Thursday morning. See it starting again here. We just see repeated kind of north-south oriented showers and thunderstorms through the start of our week, really spreading from Texas through Oklahoma back to Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, up to Minnesota and Wisconsin. But what's interesting is that toward the end of this animation, as the higher air pressure moves in by Wednesday, the storms really start to fade and fizzle out as they move toward, this part of Missouri and Indiana and Illinois. And that's because the air that pushes in behind this is relatively dry. And so not only are we going to be seeing a shift in our temperatures, but we're going to be seeing a shift in the humidity profiles. And that may mean that this precipitation really doesn't get into the eastern Corn Belt by the time we get into midweek this week. We'll take a look at that in more detail in a few moments. Here exactly is the total precipitation forecast by the NAM model, at least getting us towards Thursday. You can see that while heavy rains are going to spread across the Great Plains up toward Minnesota, we really see that by the time that front tries to move toward the eastern Corn Belt by Thursday, that drier air is really working hard on keeping things, relatively dry across Illinois and Indiana. So that's important to see as we move forward. If we stretch this out even through the next 10 days, so here I'm looking all the way out until Wednesday, October 4th, we can see the dominance of the ridge feature that's here over the eastern part of the United States, basically meaning that we're going to see a relatively dry eastern Corn Belt in the next 10 days or so, meaning that harvest efforts are really going to crank up in this part of the country. And this is reflected well by the 10-day outlook by the ECMWF model run on Sunday. So we're seeing a lot of agreement that suggests very dry eastern Corn Belt, while the central Corn Belt and northern Corn Belt is going to be drying out from the heavier rain they had at the end of the week last week and the beginning of this week. Okay, so what's been driving all of this, and what are we looking at in terms of temperatures coming up? What you just watched here is kind of the evolution of the flow of the jet stream for the next 10 days, and it tells a very important story. If we kind of step back here, by the time we get into Monday, we can see there's our broad trough still sitting over kind of the Four Corners region. That's going to be producing all the showers and storms out ahead of it. The large ridge over the eastern half of the country continues basically with the heat. But as we step forward here, we see that trough tries to kind of move on off toward the Great Lakes region, and with it we will see a bit of a change in temperature here for the eastern part of the Corn Belt. So we're expecting a cool down, some relief from the heat by the time we get into midweek this week. But there's some things that I'm seeing here that are really important for our October weather forecast. Let me show you what I'm talking about. As I move into the end of next week, look what we see rebounding here in kind of the far western Corn Belt, really getting into the Intermountain West. That's a pretty large ridge. So by the time we get to the end of our week, while the eastern Corn Belt cools down for a few days, it does appear that we're going to see some rebounding warmth moving back into much of the Corn Belt by the time we start October. So quick recap, the week starts off warm, midweek cool down for the eastern Corn Belt, and then it looks like as though we're going to see the building of heat again by the time we get into probably the start of the following week. And here's what I'm saying. Here's next Saturday, the 30th, we can see broad ridging across the country. But what I want to really get to is once we get toward the end of this animation, I think we see the whole flow pattern setting up for October such that we're going to be seeing a broad ridge here in the Bering Sea with a broader trough in the Gulf of Alaska. And if the pattern gets established like this for a while at the beginning of October, this longer wave pattern means ridge here, trough in the Gulf of Alaska, and broader ridge over the central part of the United States and potentially the eastern part of the U.S. So what I'm saying is we're going to be seeing a return of that ridge after the cool down we might get in the middle and end of this week. Maybe this ridge reestablishes itself and we start to see some warmer weather pushing deep into October. Now that does not mean that every day is going to be warmer than average for the month of October. It's just we're trying to at this point establish the overall flow pattern for that time period. And I'm just saying, I'm watching the Gulf of Alaska for a deeper trough to be developing there because that could signal ridging for the month of October, at least for a lot of the days in October over the Corn Belt. So a lot to be paying attention to there. And as we wrap up, I'm going to take a very quick look back towards South America. You know, we need this a couple of inches, really. We need a couple of inches of precip to come in from Mato Grosso all the way down to, you know, Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul. We need some rain in through this area to really allow farmers to get into the fields and get that soybean crop planted. We're seeing that over the next week or so, some drier anomalies through the kind of heart of where Brazil does most of its soybean farming. We're even seeing that extend into that first full week of October. At least we're not seeing a really wet signal in through this area. So what this really spells is we're kind of having a late start to the monsoon season, which is going to push the planting dates back for some. This isn't, you know, a huge setback, but this is certainly something that we want to be keeping an eye on because any delay we have in the planting of the soybean crop also delays that safrinha crop later on this year and the beginning of next year. So I just want to give you a quick update on what's going on in South America. And with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up this forecast. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next ag forecast on Thursday. Get morning farm report for your operations, complete with a daily email that shows you a snapshot of your field conditions each morning. Go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for the free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for a sustainable yield program or for growers who work with ADM merchandisers. I look forward to talking again on Thursday.